That one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Well, howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy back with you. And on this edition, our 201st episode, hopefully y'all listened to our 200th episode. It was a joint episode between old Corn Bandit and myself. Really proud to have gotten to that milestone. Thank you, loyal listeners, for sticking with us. I can't say enough how much I really appreciate it. But enough of that. We're moving on with bigger and better things. And on this one, we're going to continue our series on TEXIT, where we're reviewing the book TEXIT in our series called Leave the Swamp, where we talk about issues that face Texas and how do we make our home state the best it can be, the greatest land in the world. It already is the greatest land in the world, but how can we maintain that and make it even greater? What can we do to make it stand heads above all other nations in the world? And big part of that is trying to figure out, okay, how do we deal with that giant albatross that's around our neck called the U.S. federal government, or Mordor, as I like to call it. So we're going to continue that series. We're going through that book, TEXIT. But first, we're going to do a little Texas history, as we're wont to do on the podcast. So when we're recording this, we're right around the old Cinco de Mayo, which tends to end up being I don't want to call it a holiday, but it's an event day, essentially, in Texas. It makes me extremely sad that Cinco de Mayo is thought of a reason to celebrate more so than, we just got past April 21st, San Jacinto Day, the day that Texas actually became its own country. Amazingly enough, people don't remember that, but they'll remember Cinco de Mayo. Now, they won't remember what Cinco de Mayo was actually for, but they'll remember the date, at least, and more than March 2nd. March 2nd being Texas Independence Day. That's how far we've fallen, unfortunately, in the state, and how much work you and I, dear listener, have to do to constantly remind people of these important dates and why they're more important than what I would consider to be a throwaway date. I mean, it's interesting, and I'm going to read about the history of it, but it's not anything close to some of these other dates that actually meant more to Texas that we just have forgotten. But I believe you me, dear listener, that on the Feed Bandit podcast, we won't forget. So let's learn a little bit about Cinco de Mayo. So that a lot of people also, if you were to ask the average normie out there, what did it signify? And they'll say, oh, it's Mexican Independence Day. Au contraire, it couldn't be further from the truth. So that being our Mexican Independence Day, being September 16th. What is May 5th? What is Cinco de Mayo? Cinco de Mayo, 1862, Mexican general and Texas native, which is why this is extremely relevant to our podcast, Ignacio Zaragoza defeated French expeditionary forces at Puebla, Mexico. This event is celebrated annually as El Cinco de Mayo, and once widely observed throughout Mexico, today is an official public holiday only in the Mexican state of Puebla, where it's known as El Dia de la Batalla de Puebla, or Battle of Puebla Day. However, Cinco de Mayo remains popular in the United States as a celebration of Mexican culture and heritage, and I would argue as a excuse to, get people out to Mexican restaurants, sell them margaritas, and for people to drink. Not all bad, but, it's not because it's a big, historical thing in this country. But who is Ignacio Seguin Zaragoza? He was a Mexican general, as we said, the hero of Cinco de Mayo, and he was born on March 24th, 1829, at Bahia de Espiritu Santo, in the state of Coahuila y Tejas, near present-day Goliad. So he was a Texan. He was the second son of Miguel G. Zaragoza of Veracruz, Mexico, and Maria de Jesus Seguin of Bexar, who was a relative of Juan Jose Erasmo Seguin, or Juan Seguin as we know him. With Mexico's defeat in the Texas Revolution, Miguel Zaragoza, an infantryman, moved his family from Goliad to Matamoros, where Ignacio attended the school of San Juan. The elder Zaragoza was transferred to Monterrey in 1844, and Ignacio entered a seminary there. By 1846, he realized that he did not have a strong vocation and left. When the United States invaded Mexico, he volunteered to serve as a cadet in the Mexican army, but was rejected. He entered the mercantile business for a short time, and in 1853 he joined the militia of Nuevo Leon with the rank of sergeant. When his regiment was incorporated into the Mexican army, he was promoted to captain. During the 1850s, Zaragoza sided with the liberal forces, favoring the Plan de Ayutla, Mexico's first serious effort to establish a democratic and constitutional government. He took part in the battles of Saltillo and Monterrey against the armies of Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. On January 21st, 1857, while on an important army assignment in San Luis Potosi, Zaragoza was unable to attend his own marriage to Rafaela Padilla in Monterrey, so his brother Miguel served as his proxy. Wow. Zaragoza and his wife had 4 children, 3 of whom died in infancy. During the years of the War of the Reform, 1857 to 1860, the struggle between conservative powers and liberal forces led by Benito Juarez. Zaragoza took part in a number of military engagements. During Comonfort's Rebellion in 1857, he led forces in defense of the reformist principles of the Constitution. He fought in the Battle of Guadalajara, and in 1860 he participated in the Battle of Calpulpapan. I know, Carlos, you're probably wincing at that pronunciation, which ended the war. In April 1861, Juarez appointed Zaragoza Minister of War and Navy in the parliamentary ministry. 3 months later, Juarez declared a 2-year moratorium on Mexico's European debts, and in December a fleet of Spanish ships forced the surrender of Veracruz. Soon thereafter, the forces of France and England joined the Spanish. Zaragoza resigned from the ministry to lead the Army of the East, and in February 1862, a month after his wife's death in Mexico City, he began work on the defenses of Puebla. Early in 1862, the English and Spanish withdrew. French forces attacked Puebla in a battle that lasted the entire day of May 5, 1862, the now famed Cinco de Mayo. Zaragoza's well-armed, well-trained men forced the withdrawal of the French troops from Puebla to Orizaba. The number of French reported killed ranged from 476 to 1,000, although many of the troops were already ill from their stay on the coastal lowlands. Too much tequila. No, I don't know if they did that by then. Probably mezcal, but Mexican losses were reported to be approximately 86. Although the French captured Mexico City the next summer, the costly delay at Puebla is believed to have shortened the French intervention in Mexico and changed its outcome, since the French were planning to aid Confederate forces in Texas during the War of Northern Aggression. In addition, the battle rekindled the spirit of the Mexican people to win and preserve their independence. So there's a little nugget there that's pretty interesting. So had we here celebrate Cinco de Mayo, which is the Mexicans defeating the French at Puebla. However, if the French had won the Battle at Puebla and gone on to capture Mexico City earlier, then they may have come on to aid the Confederates, which may or may not, who knows, have tipped the war in the favor of the Confederacy in the War of Southern Secession or the War of Northern Aggression. Remember, don't call it a civil war. It wasn't a civil war. So that battle, in effect, may have actually been pretty big. I may have been writing it off. Although maybe it shouldn't be a battle to be celebrated, though, in that sense. Continuing, in mid-August, Zaragoza went to Mexico City, where he was feted as a hero. When he returned to his troops in Puebla, he became ill with typhoid fever and died there on September 8, 1862. A state funeral was held in Mexico City, with interment at Panteón de San Fernando. On September 11, 1862, President Juarez issued a decree changing the name of the city of Puebla de Los Angeles to Puebla de Zaragoza, and making Cinco de Mayo a national holiday. Zaragoza became one of the great national heroes of Mexico. Songs have been written in his honor, and schools, plazas, and streets have been named either Zaragoza or Cinco de Mayo. Each year on May 5th, Zaragoza societies meet throughout Mexico and in a number of Texas towns. In the 1960s, General Zaragoza's State Historic Site was established near Goliad to commemorate Zaragoza's birthplace. In 1980, dignitaries from the United States, Texas, and Mexico participated in the dedication of a 10-foot bronze statue honoring Zaragoza, commissioned by Alfredo Toji Fernandez de Lara, governor of Puebla, as a gift to the people of Goliad in Texas. The statue was placed in Goliad State Historical Park. Well, okay. A lot of that I did not know. I'm not sure if you did. Very interesting. So Zaragoza, but what I wonder, and I'll have to look up later, is they say that it was a national holiday, but then it only became, at some point it became just a holiday only celebrated in Puebla, which I wonder why that happened. Anyone out there listening, if you know, shoot us an email and let us know that history there. But anyway, that's Cinco de Mayo. So whenever you go out and you're like, "Hey, let's go out for Cinco de Mayo," yeah, blah 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 blah. Now you know why. Now you know what it is. And that little tidbit about delaying the French, as they might have been on their way to support the Confederacy, is very, very, very interesting. Has very parallels to how the French came and supported the colonists against the British, where they were successful there. Of course, they didn't have to go through another government to do that. They already owned part of Canada, whereas here they were stalled on their way to doing that, and who knows how that might have affected the war. So, fascinating stuff. All right, let's go move on back to the Leave the Swamp series. All right, if you recall, in this series, Leave the Swamp, we were talking about, or going through the book TEXIT by Daniel Miller, where he's outlining the reasons why and how Texas can become its own country again. My son actually got one of those hats. My wife was in Fredericksburg and saw a hat, a red kind of, the MAGA looking hat, although it says "Make Texas a Country Again." Why not? Well, let's continue and figure out what he has to say here. We're still in the chapter called Laying the Groundwork, and we're starting with short-term thinking and the credibility gap. The challenge with political apathy or amateurism is that those who fall into either category generally maintain some superficial awareness and engagement in the political process. Those who still vote largely restrict their activities to the voting booth. The effect is that those who superficially participate become trained to think in short 2 to 4 year cycles. Much like research that has shown that the maximum attention span of the TV generation became synchronized with the duration of programming between commercial breaks, many of those who are superficially engaged in the political process have had their cycles of commitment synchronized to the election cycles. In their minds, if something isn't achieved within the time frame of 1 or 2 election cycles, then it is a total failure and it is completely dead. Often when they look at the first defeat or setback as fatal, and it is, at least where their support is concerned. However, those who are most connected to a political community and who are politically connected seem immune, or politically engaged seem immune. Because of this, a sizable number of TEXIT supporters, through this conditioning and as a byproduct of their atomization and prolonged political apathy, contend with this challenge. Some point to a lack of major success in advancing TEXIT as a real issue. Yet one can look at some of the aforementioned examples of modern independence movements and see how this short-term thinking is really a failure in personal mindset and perspective. Scotland sought independence for 800 years. The Scottish National Party was formed in 1934, and the party didn't win its first seat in Parliament until 1945. It didn't win an electoral mandate until 2007. It followed with an independence referendum 7 years later. The UK Independence Party started pushing for a Brexit referendum in 1993, with the Labour Party first pushing for the same referendum in 1974. It was finally held in 2016. The modern political movement for the independence of Catalonia traces its roots back to 1922, yet it wouldn't see a formal referendum on the issue until 2017. In sharp contrast, the modern movement for Texas independence can trace its roots back to 1996, with the TNM, Texas Nationalist Movement, not seeing the light of day until 2005. The TNM's first legislative and political successes didn't even start until 8 years later. In comparison to these recent successful examples from around the world, the modern movement for TEXIT is in its infancy. And that's why here at Feed Bandit, we're doing our part to try to keep pushing that. Much like the other impediments, this type of impediments, kind of like my speech impediment sometimes and going through this podcast, this type of short-term thinking has real-world consequences on advancing TEXIT. Lacking proper perspective, TEXIT supporters plagued by short-term thinking are prone to discouragement. This discouragement leads to one of two distinct actions. Either the discouraged fall prey to those who promise a shortcut, or they return to their previous status as politically inert. Many well-intentioned supporters fall victim to the purveyors of the quicker, faster, better sales pitch. Texans want their grievances with the federal government addressed as quickly as possible. Those that identify TEXIT as the best solution want Texas independence to happen sooner rather than later. After all, if there is a way that it can be done faster and better, anyone who would be a fool to ignore the possibility. However, if you couple this with political amateurism, it becomes too common for Pied Pipers to lead TEXIT supporters into deeper discouragement. This has not gone unnoticed by the political class, which is quick to use it to their advantage for short-term political gain. Rick Perry, after playing coy with the issue of TEXIT in 2009, utterly failed to protect Texas from federal overreach as the governor of Texas. And that tradition of failure is continuing today with Abbott, no question. Instead of using his position to champion a vote on TEXIT, he wrote a book and is now a member, well, this is written during Trump's first term, a member of Trump's cabinet as the head of federal department he loudly declared should be abolished. These people, can't trust them. I mean, what else is, I know that's obvious, but it's just unbelievably sad. Especially when I see Texas politicians, which whenever that comes out of my mouth, Texas politicians, that phrase, before I even say what I'm about to say, my brain's already saying, of course it's the case. But I'm going to say that they utter disappointments because they're all their loyalty. Statewide politicians, in the end, all their loyalty is to Mordor, D.C., not to Texas. You have to see that. Greg Abbott seems destined to follow in Perry's footsteps, and he has. As Attorney General, Abbott's strategy in battling federal overreach could be condensed to tweet, sue, lose, repeat. And that's what he still does now, is tweet, tweet, tweet. As Attorney General, he scuttled talks between then Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst, representatives from the Texas Nationalist Movement, and his office because his primary concern was his impending campaign for governor and his fear of how it would look. Now that he is governor, it no longer has the power to sue the federal government, thereby streamlining his strategy to tweet and repeat. That's what it does. Still to this day. However, he did take a note from Perry's book, now using the phrase of, if Texas was its own country, to elicit applause. Yeah, that guy, Abbott, is such a blow with the wind type of politician. It's unbelievable. He's a spineless noodle. I mean, I don't know if puns intended there. It came out, but maybe it is. Maybe it is intended. Even as these two high-profile politicians publicly pandered to TEXIT supporters and privately derailed their efforts, there were many who vested all their hopes for a quick TEXIT into these two men and were let down. These two are just some of the high-profile examples. Over the years, TEXIT supporters have been pitched every form of quick fix for the Union or faster path to independence. Whether it's the latest political messiah running for federal office who's promising, "This time will be different," to the newest political fads like "Get out of our house" or "Convention of the States." They have all been more hype than hope and are doomed to failure. The growth of social media has amplified this phenomenon, especially when it comes to TEXIT. Anyone with 15 minutes and minimal computer skills can set up a page or group on social media, cobble together 15 or 20 followers, and declare themselves the voice of Texas independence, thereby creating additional noise that those who are seeking real answers and solutions related to TEXIT find increasingly harder to sift through. The damage to the cause of TEXIT cannot be overstated. Well, man, that kind of hits home. I hope hope we don't fall into that category. And I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that Feed Bandit and the Feed Bandit podcast and our message does not fall into that armchair warrior category. In the area where social media makes it difficult to tell real news from news generated by Russian troll farm, the hit to credibility can be and often is massive and worldwide in a matter of minutes. Occasionally, some of these online actors attempt to make the jump into the real world, declaring themselves an organization or running for office under the independence banner. Things take a turn from annoyance to farce. Some of these organizations actually make an attempt to appear credible. One such organization floated some of the most ridiculous ideas ever presented in an attempt to address serious concerns that Texans have with TEXIT. Promoted as plans, these ideas more closely resembled below-average junior-high civics projects than well-thought-out policy positions. For example, one such plank of their allegedly well-thought-out and well-researched plan proposed transferring desalinated water from the Gulf of Mexico through oil pipelines back to West Texas, declaring that it was perfectly feasible and safe because oil and water don't mix. Another small collection of malcontents, who are best known for getting arrested for pretending to be government officials and ostensibly advocates for an independent Texas, recently made a very negative statement about the Catholic faith. Congratulations, guys. You just alienated approximately 20% of Texans directly and over half of Texans who consider themselves religious indirectly. Not only that, you tied it directly to the cause of Texas independence. The point is not to ridicule these folks. It is to highlight the fact that even with the damage they cause and their obvious inability to ever get Texas out of a failing union, some people, beset by short-term thinking, view them as a viable alternative to the mainstream TEXIT movement. In doing so, they represent a disruptive and fragmented force that creates serious credibility issues for TEXIT among those who are undecided, even causing some that were for independence to throw their hands up in disgust and give up on the idea entirely. Getting and maintaining credibility is extremely important for TEXIT to advance. For every action that robs it of credibility, it takes a dozen more to regain it. The effect of losing credibility plays out predictably. When credibility becomes shaky, people who would otherwise be inclined to support TEXIT, or at a minimum, entertain the notion, lose hope that it can be done. This affects the number of true believers, which affects the amount of money people put into TEXIT. With no money, it becomes impossible to become a serious player at the ballot box, which is reflected in a TEXIT-averse legislature. A TEXIT-averse legislature means a leadership in the legislature that will stop at nothing to prevent Texans from having a referendum on the issue. This leads to frustrated pro-TEXIT supporters, who then fall prey to the Pied Pipers who promise a way to do it quicker and better. So the cycle goes. For TEXIT to advance in a timely manner, TEXIT supporters will have to adopt a more long-term, forward-thinking, disciplined, and discerning approach. I think that's a great summary of it all there. And I believe this movement has to try to avoid getting hung up on the minutia of things and look at it more from the big picture. Not avoid it falling between belief systems. But it needs to be focused more on Texas itself, and Texas itself controlling its own destiny, not being told what to do from the federal government level, having the debates that need to happen in Austin, and the final decisions that are made in Austin apply to Texans. They don't have to go through any BS approval process from a higher order, a higher power in a faraway land. That's where the argument should be. You want more control over your own life? Then support TEXIT. That's what it boils down to, in my opinion. All right, continuing. Dual identities. I'm often invited to speak at meetings of civic and political organizations throughout Texas. These meetings are generally very patriotic affairs. Invariably, attendees are asked to stand facing the flag of the United States, place their hands over their hearts, and recite these words. Quote, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Then the attendees are directed to face the Texas flag and recite the Texas pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. The Texas pledge is sometimes conducted as a normal part of the meeting agenda. Other times I'm fairly certain they tack it on because I am there. Either way, the situation always strikes me as funny. Yeah, who's your allegiance to? Is it Texas or U.S.? Let's see what he has to say. Here's a group of people who are the most patriotic of the patriotic, who often despise socialism in all of its forms, first pledging their allegiance to the flag of a union and declaring its indivisibility, not realizing that the words were penned by an avowed socialist. That's so true. When they turn and pledge their allegiance to Texas, shortly before introducing the guy who's going to spend the next 30 to 45 minutes explaining that it's not possible to hold a dual allegiances to equivalent political bodies, and that whole indivisible thing in the U.S. pledge is really a myth. Yeah, that's a great point. It's also fairly typical for me to conduct a question and answer section after my remarks. There is almost always that one person who takes the floor to express how he or she believes that Texas is the way to go, while decked out head to toe in American flag gear. That is hilariously true. And that's why at Feed Bandit, you're not going to see an American flag unless it's in some sort of print or something where we're trying to make the point that Texas is the equivalent in sovereignty as the United States. That's it. Less common are the people who begin their questioning by declaring their love for Texas and their opposition to TEXIT, following it with a pledge of undying love and support for the federal system they previously agreed is beyond repair. Major cognitive dissonance amongst people, for sure. I chuckle, but I never point out the irony of the situation. There is no need. I'm certain that either immediately after, sometime down the road, they will reflect on that moment, and it will hit them like it did me. This is not isolated to those who are undecided about TEXIT, either. Through contacts with thousands of Texas voters, it has not gone unnoticed that some of the quickest to pledge their support to TEXIT are the ones decked out in the most American flag clothing. It could be, and has been, argued that these folks are deeply committed to American principles and, because of how far the rest of the Union has strayed from those principles, now support Texas leaving the Union to preserve these principles. However, the mere act of clinging to the symbols and identity of the United States is another significant impediment to the advancement of TEXIT. Bam! I totally agree with that. And that's why whenever I see driving on the road or walking in my neighborhood that people flying the U.S. flag, it just says, in my mind, it's like, why are you not flying the Texas flag? Or at least fly it with it. Fly it above the U.S. flag. Fly the Texas flag. Like my neighborhood, the main entrance flies this gigantic U.S. flag. I'm like, first thing that strikes me is, I'm pretty sure everyone knows we're in the United States. Why not show our love for the state that we actually live in and fly the Texas flag instead. But I digress. Looking back at the first Texas Revolution and the American Revolution, I find no examples of anyone who played a significant role in either who claimed that it was possible to maintain an allegiance to the body from which they were separating, while declaring their allegiance to the cause of birthing a new nation among nations. In fact, every contemporaneous source indicates the exact opposite. In Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of the Causes and Necessity for Taking Up Arms, he emphatically states that, quote, "Our attachment to no nation on earth should supplant our attachment to liberty," quote, end quote, thereby discouraging continued allegiance to nations or institutions that are detrimental to liberty. In the previously cited letter from the Committee of Safety of Liberty in 1835, its authors were clear that there was no middle ground. Quote, "The contest is for liberty or slavery, for life or death. For the tranquil possession of the country we have redeemed from barbarism, or a forcible ejection from it. It admits of no neutrals." Both declarations of independence are clear in their call for an eternal political separation, but it's safe to assume that the separation in spirit and mind happened well before the words were committed to paper. I cannot find any example of those who fought in the American Revolution continuing to refer themselves as British, nor are there any accounts from soldiers at the Alamo or in Houston's army referring to themselves as Mexicans. Lest we think of these as artifacts from a distant age, a quick glance at modern movements for self-determination says otherwise. In Scotland's push for independence, there was not a Union Jack flag flying among those advocating for their exit from the UK. If you ask pro-independence Scots whether they were Scottish or British, you'd likely get a quizzical look before an emphatic declaration of "I'm Scottish." During the campaign for Brexit, the Leave campaigners never displayed the flag of the European Union alongside the Union Jack. In fact, the presence of the European flag on British soil was seen as an affront and a direct attack on the Britishness of the UK. You would be hard-pressed to find a single person who voted Leave that considered him or herself both British and European. They would readily admit that Britain was a part of Europe by virtue of geography, but that's where it ended. However, this mindset is on full display every September 11th in Barcelona, when 1.5 million Catalans take to the streets to celebrate a famous battle in their history, celebrate their national identity, and express their desire for independence. The streets are a sea of Senyera Estelada, Catalonia's version of the Lone Star flag. What is nowhere in evidence is the flag of Spain. For self-determined, that should be March 2nd. We should be celebrating all across the state, flying only Texas flags everywhere, every March 2nd. And the fact that that doesn't happen, and people don't even know what happened on March 2nd here, sometimes just makes me say, it ain't going to happen. Like, oh my God, it's way too much work. But I cannot allow it to pass. You shall not pass. That thought will not pass, and we will get past this. We will. I don't know what we'll do, but we'll solve that problem. For self-determination movements to make significant progress, they must identify as something different than that which they are leaving. If there is no distinction, then there is really no reason to leave. That's why Catalans identify as Catalans. Brexiteers identify as Brits, and Scots identify as Scots. It's also why for TEXIT to have breakthrough moment, TEXIT advocates must begin to transition their thinking to identify as Texans, and Texans only. And I do that all the time. Whenever we're traveling and everything, they ask, "Where are you from?" I'm from Texas. With my kids, I say, "Where do you say you're from?" When people ask, I'm from Texas. When they say, "What are you?" or when you say what you are, you say, "I'm a Texan." Always. You should always say that. Always. In reality, if the United States was a federative republic, it was intended to be. This is how Texans and the people of other states would already think. The fact that this is actually an issue is further proof that the Union has mutated beyond its purpose. The federal system was never meant by its founders to subsume the individual identity and character of its constituent states or the people within them. One could reasonably argue that this has been perhaps the biggest impediment to pushing past the tipping point. It causes even the most ardent Texas supporters to have an inconsistent worldview and to take seemingly contradictory positions on issues of the day. It creates a lack of cohesion, leading to a hokey-pokey mentality, where one day they find their right foot in TEXIT, and the next day their right foot out. Yeah, I can see where that's tough. So you got to start with the mind, right? And the mind is Texas and Texan. Texas and Texan. While your passport may be issued by the Secretary of State of the United States, it's just a document. You're a Texan. You come from Texas. You live in Texas. Money. In 2017, one Texas state representative confessed to me that he was personally saw as the major impediment to getting Texas independence referendum legislation filed in the Texas legislature. Quote, "If I file this bill, the establishment will absolutely recruit a challenger to run against me in the primaries. I will likely have to spend over $250,000 to defend my seat and get a few thousand more people in my district out to the polls." End quote. In short, he knew that political battles take resources and that TEXIT was resource poor. Even with all the public success of the TNM, a recent report highlights the challenge faced by a lack of money. The 2016 annual report from the organization showed that the organization operates on an annual budget of $42,000 per year, forcing them to rely exclusively on volunteers for all top-level positions, lean on personal contributions from those same volunteers, and focus exclusively on social media, earned media, and on-the-ground outreach from a handful of active volunteers to get the word out. Yet, in Texas, much like other places, the cost of political campaigns is higher than it's ever been. The amount of money needed to consistently and effectively reach voters is staggering. A Texas Tribune report from 2017 examined the campaign finance reports from the 2016 general election. Its findings put a concrete figure on the problem. Quote, "In the most closely watched Texas race last year, of U.S. Representative Will Hurd's re-election bid against former U.S. Rep. Pete Gallego, Hurd won by fewer than 3,000 votes. But Hurd, a Republican, spent big for that win, shelling out $29.12 per vote, among the highest in the state. Gallego, a Democrat, spent $15.75 per vote. In Greg Abbott's campaign for governor in 2014, he spent in excess of $8 million and received a little over 1.2 million votes, an average of $6.65 per vote. These figures are typical of the modern political system. If candidates or causes want even a chance to win, they have to be prepared to shell out the money to reach voters. When these figures are applied to TEXIT, the challenge is readily identifiable. To connect with and organize the number of people necessary for TEXIT to hit the tipping point, it will take a minimum spend of $8 to $10 million. That's just to get to the starting line. When the math is applied to actually campaigning in a TEXIT referendum, the buy-in starts at $50 million. On the surface, it seems like TEXIT has a money problem. It doesn't. A survey commissioned by the TNM gives a snapshot of financial demographics of TEXIT supporters. Some 49% earn between $50,000 and $100,000 per year, and another 25% earn more. A full 4% earn more than $500,000 a year. These numbers show that TEXIT supporters possess the resources required to significantly impact its progress. In reality, TEXIT has a donor problem. If every currently declared supporter of TEXIT contributed $27 tomorrow, the initial $10 million target would be achieved. That, however, is with 100% participation, which is completely unrealistic given what is known about how few people, not just TEXIT supporters, actually give political contributions. A report from the Center for Responsive Politics analyzed campaign finance data from 2015 to 2016 federal elections and found that an extremely small percentage of people across the states actually financially participated in the political process. A scant 0.52% of the U.S. population gave in excess of $200 in campaign contributions, with only 0.08% giving more than $2,700. Taken alone, these percentages seem paltry, but they add up. In that same election cycle, the total given by those giving less than $2,700 was right at $1 billion. The contributions over $2,700 totaled in excess of $3.5 billion. Contributions of less than $200 amounted for a staggering $1.5 billion. During the height of the presidential campaign cycle in 2016, Trump's campaign reported that in the month of July, his campaign raised $35.8 million from 517,000 small donors, each given an average of $69 each. According to the Washington Post, Hillary Clinton supporters contributed $8.7 million between 8 p.m. on July 28th, the night Clinton addressed the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia, and 8 p.m. the next day. In a 24-hour period, Clinton raised more money than Abbott spent for his entire 2014 gubernatorial campaign. Raising the money to move the needle on TEXIT is possible. However, the other impediments to TEXIT create the donor issue and leave the movement cash-starved. The fragmented, politically apathetic don't want to donate because they have no hope that TEXIT will actually happen. The politically naive deny the reality of the role that money plays in the process. The myopic and double-minded shuffle their financial support from one cause to the other, lining the pockets of snake oil salesmen who don't possess the ability or the desire to deliver on TEXIT. This lack of cash restricts the momentum of TEXIT and leaves its proponents fighting like guerrillas rather than the well-oiled political machine that is required. Man, we have just thinking of these numbers makes me think about something now, and it goes to college and then NIL stuff where big donors are able to essentially buy players in college, pay them $1 million, $2 million a year or whatever, and put up a lot of money in order to do that. I mean, all it takes is one multi-millionaire to say, look, I'm going to set aside $10 million, and this money is going to be dedicated to just pushing the idea of TEXIT constantly. And to say, look, I implore everybody else to donate as well. If they match it, then I'll match it again. That's $20 million. Let's say if you're a billionaire, $20 million is nothing. And how many billionaires are in this state? Or how many 500 millionaires could come together to do that deal together? Now, a lot of these guys, their bed is feathered by a lot of federal money, so I get it. It's going to have to be someone who either made their money through federal bed feathering, if you will, and said enough is enough. I need to, quote unquote, give back what I stole from the taxpayers, or someone who makes their money honestly and outside the whole system and says, the hell with it. I'm going to make it my life's work to use my money to make this happen. I'm just floored that there hasn't been one person stand up to be able to do that. I mean, I wish that if we were to get to that point where I had the money to do it, I hope one of my biggest hopes in the world is that I'll have the courage to do that when we get to that point. All right, let's bring this chapter to a close here with bringing it together. However daunting these challenges seem, they aren't insurmountable. Virtually every other modern movement for independence has faced the same challenges. While each had differences rooted in their own culture, political system, and circumstances, they were all variations on the same themes. The political class would love nothing more than to see TEXIT stuck at the point of seeming inevitability. For the opposition, it would display an ever-present boogeyman they could use to mobilize their supporters without ever having to directly address the uncomfortable issues raised by an actual debate on TEXIT. Pandering politicians would have a ready-made pool of passionate Texans who could flirt with the idea to maintain support for their campaigns or parties, filling their campaign coffers without ever giving TEXIT supporters what they really want. And I wonder how many of the people who sign that pledge that they have are that latter, where they're just playing it for political purposes. Because, I really wonder, because let's say if I was the state representative here in this area, or senator, this would be one of my biggest issues, and I would be talking about it constantly with my supporters. And I don't hear anything from either of our senator or a representative here. I never hear anything from them whatsoever. The only one I actually hear from is our U.S. representative around here, Chip Roy. And the guy, he's got decent rhetoric here and there, but he's a big government Republican. He's not interested in cutting anything else. He's just another one. You know, the big bald with the goatee. Look how tough I am. I'm a tough Texan. Then come out and start talking about this stuff. Otherwise, until you do that, no, you're shit. You're nothing. Bad news for them. Nothing stays the same forever. TEXIT supporters, slowly but surely, are beginning to recognize the value of networking with one another. They're beginning to understand that exercising the right of self-government doesn't have to wait until a TEXIT referendum, and are learning the skills necessary to effectively compete in the political process. For many, this has been like transforming from a goldfish waiting at the surface of the water to be fed into a shark that is singularly focused on its prey. Make no mistake, those who have made this transformation have smelled blood in the political waters. This has led to a broadening of their vision and a recommitment to seeing TEXIT through to the end. This broader vision has led to a general intolerance for the peddlers of false hope and a new discerning eye that sees the role of the TEXIT supporter transformed from a passive cheerleader to the immune system for the cause, acting to protect it at all costs. While there has been movement on some of these issues that should be encouraging to supporters of TEXIT, the issues of double-mindedness in relation to the union and the general failure to accept the role money plays in the political process require serious attention for TEXIT to move to the next level. However, the momentum on solving the other issues is likely to create movement on these issues as well. The real difficulty comes in determining when TEXIT will eventually toe up to the starting line. Frankly, there's no way to know. Outside of some major external catalyzing event affecting the majority of Texans, it will take smaller, more personalized, catalyzing moments to strengthen the individual political will of TEXIT supporters and challenge their character in such a way that there's no option for them other than forward to TEXIT. Given the trajectory of TEXIT, lessons learned from other modern independence movements, with an understanding of the field of play, and the current level of friction within the movement, TEXIT is on the cusp of becoming an inevitable and unstoppable force. As these impediments continue to resolve, it's time to buckle up, because a TEXIT referendum is coming. I hope so. That's the end of that chapter. I hope so. What it's going to take is a lot of you and me and Corn Bandit and our buddies, your buddies, people just mentioning it and talking about it. It's tough. It's so tough because people get so busy in their life and everything. But let me tell you, I got to tell you, with things that we've been putting out, and it starts with the basic things, and it gets people thinking and asking questions. Like I have on my truck, my license plate has said secede for, almost 20 years now. Christy is 19 years old right now. That truck will be 20 years old next year, and I've had a secede license plate on that truck for that long. And now that I don't drive that truck as a daily driver all the time, I have a 4Runner, and that 4Runner has a license plate. That license plate says TEXIT 3. Why does it say TEXIT 3? Well, TEXIT itself was already taken, and variations of that. But then I saw, TEXIT 3 is available. Huh. And I got to thinking, well, that would make sense. The third TEXIT would be the one we're talking about trying to do right now. The first one being the War of Independence against Mexico. The second one being the when we seceded from the United States, joined the Confederacy, and then were subsequently conquered and forced back into the Union. The third would be what I'm talking about doing now. Breaking the albatross that's holding us down, that's trying to drag us down into the abyss. That's Washington, D.C. or Mordor. That's what is needed now in Texas, possibly more than anything. And I look at let's look at these tariff issues that came up that are happening right now. It's absolute insanity. It's basically, once again, the federal government shooting all of us and itself in the head. It's like you're killing yourself, basically. We've been working really hard on getting our hunting camp polos and our Texas camp polos, designed and find a manufacturer and things of this nature. And we would love nothing more than to make these in Texas, 100% made in Texas. That would be amazing with Texas cotton or whatever else. But that can't be done because of the U.S. federal government and their stupid regulations, employment policy laws, and all the other stupid BS that the federal government forces upon the people of Texas. So it pushes all this stuff out of the state and into the arms of the Chinese and the Vietnamese and whatever else. And you know what? They've gotten really good at it. Good for them. Comparative advantage, right? And that allowed us to continue to buy things cheaply. Okay. Well, now with these tariffs, especially on China, the supplier that we're looking at working with, cut off shipments to the United States. And that's fine. We weren't going to buy anymore with 145% tariff because it would have meant that for the price we thought, the value of the shirt that we thought, what they were worth and what we want to sell them for, we would have had to end up paying an extra $5 on every sale because of the stupid tariffs that were put in place. So that has drastically slowed our process of trying to get these shirts done. We're working on other solutions and whatnot, but it's 100% due to idiotic federal government policies, basically harming a fledgling small business here in Texas. And I'm here to tell you, this is not the only one that's been harmed by this, and who's going to be harmed, if not destroyed, by these tariffs issues, especially these tariffs on China. It's going to happen if things don't change fast or turn around. It's very sad. There's many businesses out there that rely on all their products being produced in China. And it's not going to move back here. It's absolutely not going to move back here. Not under the United States, that is. Now, if Texas were to leave the United States, which is what we advocate here, and say we're not going to reinstate in Texas the idiotic regulations and labor laws and all this extra BS that has driven all of our industry out of this country, if we're not going to reinstitute that stuff, then yes, things will move back here. Oh, and we're not going to institute a income tax in Texas, which God forbid that ever happens here. That's one of a great thing that is not here is we don't have an income tax. So you get rid of those things, regulations, labor, and income tax, all that stupid crap from the federal government. You get rid of those things, and you leave. Stop allowing the federal government in D.C. to steal your hard-earned money, and then keep the state of Texas at the size that it is now. It's already too big, but let's just say, okay, that's the compromise. It stays where it is now. You do that. Yes, the President Trump always talks about it's going to be the greatest economy of all time. Well, no, it's not unless you do all those things. But in Texas, it could be if we left, because then we wouldn't have all that stuff hanging over us and all that bureaucracy and all that crap to deal with. And that would unleash the most unbelievable prosperity here in the state that the world's ever seen. That is the message that we need to talk about. See, nothing in there I talked about, Democrats, Republicans, blah, blah, blah. It's that big issue, trying to get people to understand that bigger issue, the bigger consequence in the sense of prosperity that could come. If it doesn't happen, then the totally opposite's going to happen. Texas will be dragged down into the abyss. All these things, if they're not turned around, it's going to be, my prediction is it will be a giant mess, and it'll be very sad. And you know what? Maybe a bigger giant mess down the road will actually be the catalyst to actually get us there. It's sad to know that we could do it now and probably avoid all that stuff. But humans being humans, perhaps something worse like that is what's needed to wake us up, punch us in the face to wake up, or stick our head in the water, and finally realize, oh man, we should have done that 20 years ago. Imagine where we'd be now if we had done that 20 years ago and when I was 20 years younger, But like I said, that's the nature of man, and okay. But just walk away from this podcast believing that things would be significantly better in our great state if we did not have the abusive spouse, the abusive master is really what it is, the abusive slave master out of Washington, D.C., whipping us and ordering us around all the time and then stealing the productivity of our labor to be wasted away on. Just think of all the waste that Mordor does, So anyway, something to leave you with. I hope that doesn't come across as too much of a downer, because I truly believe that this whole idea, this possibility, just the very fact that there's a possibility that Texas could leave and slough off all that extra crap that's holding us back is exciting to me, is positive to me. It is proof that an amazing future will be with us. Is possible out there. So all that to be said, hopefully, we'll be getting a lot more stuff in, working on the polos. The polos are there, especially the Texas camp polos, so that you can wear your message and show people. We're working on those. We have hats too. The hats are great. So just look at those. I'm excited to kind of get those out there to you guys. So get on our email list as well. Go to feedbandit.com, join our email list, so you'll be notified on when this stuff is released and out there. So with that is our next edition of the Leave the Swamp series. Yes, there's a lot of crap going on out there. There's a lot of mess, but at the same time, there's this bright light that we can focus on called TEXIT to get us to where we need to be. And, if we were to do that in the next 10 years, and then 10 years after that, oh my God, Texas would have a colony on the moon if we could get out from under the thumb of Mordor. Just imagine, I'd be 65, still be young. That'd be awesome. Go spend a week on the moon. Anyway, because we would not be held back. But that's that. I really appreciate you listening. Stay tuned for more Feed Bandit podcast. Hopefully you'll stick around for the next 200 episodes. We really appreciate it. And the next one, we'll get back into more outdoors and hunting. So we got some ideas coming down the pike. We got the off season is here, almost here. I mean, it's a week left in turkey season or so, maybe a little less. And then it's the off season. Predator hunting, work on your ranch and your lease, getting ready for dove and white-tailed deer and whatever else. Obviously, you can shoot hogs and exotics and stuff. So, still a lot to talk about. We're going to continue our other series, though. Because you can go back and re-listen to these things to remember what's going on. So we got the whitetail series going, the turkey series going. We just started the predator series. So I'm excited to keep those going, and we will catch you on the next episode of the Feed Bandit podcast. Remember, support your local feed store. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Well, I hope the bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Anna. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.